welcome to Tub Talks with Damon. My special guest on location in Puerto Rico is Chris Zivalich.
Hi.
All the way from Colorado. I'm from New York, he's from Colorado, and
Denver.
we are here in Puerto Rico at the United States Conference on HIV and AIDS.
Yes, we are. Hi.
How you doing?
I'm great. I'm here. I was kind of not sure what would happen with this conference. There was a lot of layers.
It was iffy. We weren't sure we were going to have a conference.
And I think that the host committee and all the folks involved did a really good job at trying to make sure that we could visit this space ethically and recognize why it was important to have this conference here in Puerto Rico. And so I'm excited. And I've learned a lot about Puerto Rico regionally since I've been here. Kind of not great statistics, but it shows a lot of the fight that we have to do. So I learned that in terms of PrEP and HIV prevention access, that Puerto Rico has one of the lowest amounts of folks on PrEP compared to the need. So kind of like that prevalence need ratio. There's just a lot of health systems that aren't fair and equitable here because they're not a state or not included.
Power grid system is not fair and equitable.
Oh my gosh. Exactly. So there's many, I keep looking over there.
Yeah.
There's many.
It's both.
I'm talking to the audience,
Both hands.
Just learned a lot of things. Happy to be here. Beautiful, cultural, beautiful place.
Sunburn, people can tell. That's it's beautiful. You're getting, that's important. I think it's really important at these conferences that we do self-care and have some downtime and have some vacation time. Because a lot of people here are so happy to be here. We haven't met. A lot of us haven't seen each other in 3 years. And people are full blast. And oh my God, so tired of the first day. And we all got to face this.
Exactly. Yes.
So I'm glad you're getting to some sun and have had a chance to enjoy.
I did. Yeah, I walked around El Morro and the big defense structure near Old San Juan that really allowed the Spanish colonizers to run the show for hundreds of years. And so I learned a lot about that history, the good, the bad, the ugly, and was out in the sun a lot as I walked around that entire space.
And clearly you were wearing a shirt, which is...
I was wearing a shirt. Yeah, it was too bad. I wore a black shirt, too. So I was really sweating quite a bit. And just, please, sunlight, make me sweat even more.
Well, speaking of shirts.
Okay.
I love the messages you put onto Instagram. Okay. The way you communicate on social media. The link to your Instagram page is right down below here on YouTube. But before I ask you about that, I want to find out from you, what do you like most about your body?
I love that you ask this question to everybody, because I think it's a question a lot of people don't get asked in their life. Yes. I think I would say my chest. Yes. I love chest hair, and I like that that's one of the few areas of my body where I can grow hair. Yeah. It's like the first body part that I had any kind of real change in when I decided I wanted to start, working out and that whole thing, and so... yeah, I guess I will say that.
That's great. Yeah. Show the people. And you get to see a lot more of it if you follow him on Instagram. You get to see a lot more of this great stuff. Now, was there ever a time when you were growing up that you felt pressure not to have chest hair, or you felt that you should not have body hair?
Ooh, that's such a good question. I don't feel like I had explicit messages. I wasn't in any kind of space where body hair was particularly shamed, but I do think you get those sort of messages broadly from society. I remember when we went through what they call it, growing and changing, so to speak, right? The sort of puberty classes you go through in elementary and middle school, and talking about, you're going to develop, pubic hair and armpit hair, and being like, well, I don't know that I want that, right? And what I would say has changed over time for me, I didn't have messages that it was a bad thing necessarily, but I didn't have messages that it was like this lovely, sexy, erotic preferred thing. And that, I think, changed as I aged myself and kind of became more embedded in the queer community, the gay community, and was like, oh yeah, we love hairy people. We love people who aren't hairy too. Yeah. But you kind of got that ability to embrace it more.
Yeah. In my anecdotal non-data experience, because we don't have any really good research, but I think men with body hair get more attention, get more erotic energy drawn toward them.
That's kind of this almost... I don't know if it is sort of inadvertent reverse effect where maybe it had a negative association at certain times in people's lives, but you're right. It kind of now has that masculinity associated with it, so folks who don't have it can feel sort of excluded or isolated. So that's a really good Yeah, that's a good point.
I'd love for someone to do a research study.
Yeah, someone do a study on.
It's not going to be me, but I would love for someone to do. I always thought if I ever did get a PhD, it would be about men and their body hair.
Oh my gosh!
Sort of objective thing about who finds what desirable.
There's a good book, and oh my gosh, because I wasn't prepared to bring this up, I'm getting blank on the author's name, but it's Women with Mustaches and Men Without Beards. Ooh. And it is about the history of gender categories in Iran, pre and post colonization, and it talks a lot about body hair. And this body hair, I mean, it's not the only theme of the book, right? It's talking about, again, colonialism and gender categories and third genders and all this kind of stuff. But she's bringing up how much hair plays a role in the way people decide to categorize folks, and again, whether that gives them power or takes away power.
Wow.
So, now, body hair's a thing.
It is. It's really interesting. The relationship that gay and queer men have to their bodies, and their body hair is fascinating to me. Yes. In the 26 years I've been working as a therapist, there's been a lot of.
I'm sure you heard a lot of things.
A lot of things. So I'm really interested when someone, especially with social media now, says, "I want to show and celebrate my awesome body." And different sides. So I've seen you and watched you on Instagram use your profile to show this chest, to show this body. So tell me more about how you decided to do that.
Okay, I'm trying to think of, so there's a couple different things that I want to say. First of all, I feel like it became a tool for me at a certain point. And I've thought about this before, because sometimes I want to reflect on it and say, am I just using this account to reinforce certain, problematic things where we're only seeing certain types of bodies? And so I really reflect on this often. One of the things that I came to a conclusion is how organic this is about myself, because I would look at these photos from sort of pre-Instagram days, and I just am not really wearing clothes in a lot of them, starting in college. And my body fluctuated throughout that whole time, right? So I think part of it is
in what way?
In just the body hair, weight, type of, everything really, in terms of just my body changed throughout, my life, like it does for a lot of people. That's very normal. And so part of it, I think, is it's just a little bit of who I am. Yeah. Okay, so that's part of it.
Showing off.
Showing off a little bit. We my sisters even made jokes before with my nibblings, my little niece and nephew who are 2 and 4. They're always running around in their underwear, and it's like, just like your uncle.
Oh, that's cute.
So, maybe there's some genetics. Do a study on that.
That's cute.
But then, no, I think I started to really just embrace the authenticity of being myself, and that is one component of it. I don't also want to make it sound like I'm not shaped by these other systems, though. I think Instagram kind of encourages that a little bit specifically, too, right? So I've adapted to make it my own. This is what I want to show about myself, and I get to choose the caption and the commentary and the hashtag and everything that goes along with it. But I think you get on Instagram and you're like, this is also kind of part of the culture. I don't know, does that make sense?
The culture of
celebrating body, or showing body, or making a body-centered, or not body-centered, but just making that a part of, I don't know, the way you archive your life in some ways through platforms like Instagram.
It is so, I guess, to be as an observer and someone who didn't grow up with Instagram, it feels like such a mix. There's so many ways, there's 2 ways it can go. I see people sometimes using those platforms in a way that sort of inflates a false sense of self.
Okay.
And people who are trying very hard to present a facade about their life and about their world and about their body and about their confidence. Yep. And, for me, that's very clear when it's not really what they're feeling.
Right.
But what I like about your page is that, for me, at least for me, it feels very authentic. It feels like, hey, I just like having fun over here. I'm just like in my house, cleaning my house, and I feel good, and I'm going to take a picture today. I'm just being goofy and fun. I mean, I like that.
Okay, I appreciate you saying that, and this is, I guess, what I was getting at in the beginning, is I've reflected on this a lot because, I do want to be mindful of the way sizes or other kinds of body negative, if you want to call it that, practices can, again, reinforce these sort of problematic things. So I think about this a lot, and I've talked to a lot of friends about it, and I kind of get similar feedback, which I find so interesting, of, oh, well, I feel like you're really living yourself authentically. So what I want to know is, if I'm allowed to ask you the question.
Ask me anything.
Why do you feel like, do you have any, and this could be for me or other folks, where you get that same idea, that feeling authentic? Like, what about it makes it feel that it is authentic versus the person who's maybe trying to put on a facade.
You mean in your page?
In my page or other pages similar where you get the same vibe.
I guess it's because you look like there's joy. Underneath it all, there's an authentic joy. I'm not saying happy, because I'm not saying that's necessarily what you feel or that's even a goal. But I'm saying underneath, I feel like from just watching your profile, there's a sense of joy, there's a sense of play, there's a sense of silliness. There's also a sense of having come through some shit in life. To have the confidence to do what you're doing. I don't feel like that just came to you automatically. I feel like this is something you have worked for.
Absolutely. I think a lot of queer people have gotten to that point in their lives, and I think a lot of queer people have also not. And the way we get there, because I guess what I'm saying is we have that shit we've gone through, that tends to be a shared experience for a lot of queer people, and then it's it's impacted by these other layers in your life, these other identities, and then sometimes you're given, I think, different resources or tools or opportunities to get to that level of confidence. And that's interesting that you see that. I don't know where I was going with that. It made more sense in my
head. I mean, it's just a sense that I get. And I'm sometimes wrong. I don't think I'm wrong about you, but I think I'm sometimes wrong. I've mistaken people's Facebook or Instagram or thought that they were the person they were presenting. Turns out they weren't.
Absolutely.
I've definitely had those experiences.
Absolutely. Yep.
But I guess I just feel like yours is not like this like Kardashian level desperation for attention. It's more like
keeping up with the Zivaliches.
Yeah.
We're gonna get our own shows.
All the little nephews and nieces in their underwear.
Hey, that'd be cute.
This feels like more like an expression and reflection of something, of an energy that is
part
of who you are.
Wow. All I will say in general about this conversation is I love when we have these moments in life where someone can essentially tell you their interpretation of you, and it's wild because you've not thought of yourself in that way. Or
Do you think I'm off?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm a very joyful person. I feel confident in who I am. Again, that doesn't mean I'm always happy or I'm always secure or I'm all these things that we, of course, are not consistently as humans. But no, I just think it's humbling and lovely to hear someone like reflect that back onto you.
Yeah.
So,
So how did you decide that you wanted to start just like presenting your body and sharing your energy in an authentic way to the public?
Again, this is a really hard question because I think
that's why I ask them.
Yeah, the hard-hitting questions here. This is
probably the Barbara Walter of bathtubs.
This is the gotcha journalism. Twice gotcha. With question and you're in a bathtub.
Yes, and if you were a tree, what tree would don't? That was a Barbara Walters question.
You can see the tree from my backyard. Yeah. I know I'm mixing cultural references here. So yeah, exactly.
How you decided to do it?
How I decided to do it. Again, I think the tool was first of all, I learned the tool in itself. Like, what is something like Instagram? Yeah. I'm just like any human. I'm looking at what other people are doing on it, right? Oh, they're sharing their food. They're sharing their workout exercises. They're sharing their whatever. And so then I think I started to adapt that and make it my own. And I will say this goes beyond, I think, my Instagram in that I am a kind of a joyful updater, I think, in my world, right? Like in my Facebook or in people I see in person. I'm the kind of person who, one time I had a coworker say this to me, that they came to my office because they're like, it just needed like a fun story. And they asked me, do you have one? I said, yeah. And I just told one. And I think that, and not to like say, be my entertainment, but more just like, I love to kind of provide that for people. Yeah. I'm a big extrovert. I'm a big communicator. I like to be a storyteller. And so I think that just kind of naturally lends itself to your social media turning into that, where it's like, hey, these are things I'm doing, and you might find them interesting or humorous or whatever, and then it starts to line up with also this change over time where it's not just about my body. I think in general, as I've aged, it's like I'm just more confident in who I am. This is who I am.
Say more.
These are my boundaries. This is my identity. This is
some more confidence.
This is a confidence. So I've thought about this because, for example, I'm going to a little college reunion with my friends next week. I graduated 10 years ago. So even just the idea of comparing yourself 22 to 32, wow, I don't care about some of the same things that I used to really fixate on. That same old story of like what people think about you. You start to just let go of that. And so I think the way you present your body, among other things, falls in line with that process.
So would you have, if we had had Instagram 10 years ago, would you have been able to do this kind of profile? Would you have shared these parts of your lives 10 years ago?
I don't think I would have. It goes back to the photos of me still not wearing clothes. Yeah. I think there's parts of me that would be the same, right? Of not being afraid to just be who I am. But I don't. No, I don't. I think it would have still. I think I would have cared a lot more what people thought about the process, if that makes sense. I think I would have invested in that more, and maybe I wouldn't have even posted as much, because maybe I would have been thinking more strategically, is this the right thing to put up? Blah, blah, blah. And now it just feels very organic to my life experiences. Yes. I mean, of course, I still have those things going back to I think about, is this me doing something problematic? Is this me doing something? I still hold myself accountable and have those processes, but it just feels also very natural.
Right. I mean, there's a sort of a moral compass that we each have.
A moral compass,
our integrity. Yes. But that's different from not doing something because we're insecure or afraid or responding to societal shoulds.
Okay, that's a better way of actually summarizing that. Yeah, we're not responding to the shoulds and just saying, this is what I'm doing today.
Yeah, which I think about with this series all the time. I want this series. This is why my series is to the best of my ability done with integrity and trying to have these conversations. But I do think about okay, so I'm very aware that I'm excluding people who can't use stairs in New York City, who can't.
Oh my gosh, right? Absolutely, ableism in it. Yeah,
who can't get in and out of a bathtub. That has been pointed out many times, and I'm okay.
Or had enough traumatizing experiences that even though there's a beautiful vulnerability that comes with being naked in a tub, some people might be like, I'm not ever getting naked in anything.
That is the whole thing. That is why a lot of people have said no to this.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Which is fair. Totally fair.
Absolutely. And at the same time, I'm okay, but this is my life. This is my tub. These are the talks I want to have. This is how it goes at this point.
Period.
And it's not, perfect is not the enemy of the good.
Okay, yes, exactly. Yeah, right.
I'm not even sure it's all that good.
No, you're trying to do something where you're trying to facilitate these kinds of conversations. I mean, especially, and you focused so much of it again in sexual health and HIV and that being at this conference, right, where we're working with advocates, policymakers, physicians, all kinds of folks who are a part of that world. This seems relevant to us, these tub talks.
Thank you.
There you go. There's my vote of support.
Yes, thank you. So we mentioned more confidence coming with aging. Now, by the time this airs, you're 32 now, but you'll be 33 by the time this airs.
It's before December 4th. It's before December 4th, I'll be 32.
So you'll be on the cusp of 33.
I'll be on the cusp, yes.
The edge of 33. So I love hearing that perspective, that what aging has the possibility to do is to give us more confidence, give us more of a sense of being rooted, to be able to do silly things on Instagram or silly bathtub interviews, or to really express who we are in authentic ways.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm aware that a lot of people don't experience chronological aging this way.
Correct. Right.
How do you think you've learned? As a gay man who is now in your early 30s, was aging ever something you were scared of or something that ever seemed terrifying?
That's a really good question, because I think aging gets that sort of bad rap, right? Think of our world and it's not just gay men, our world in general is full of anti-aging ideology, whether that's in everything from the products we sometimes put on ourselves to not look old to anything else. And so I'm sure I've picked up on a lot of those messages. What I've noticed is I think that sometimes the fear around aging comes with certain things for folks that maybe I've also been blessed with not having the same fears about. So I'll give you an example. Sometimes people, if they don't have a partner or something, that makes this aging process almost seem scarier, right? I have a lot of friends who are around my age, and if they're single, they have that idea of but I'm in my 30s and I don't have a relationship, and that seems to exacerbate that fear. And I have been in a relationship since I was 25. My partner is 12 and a half years older than me, but nevertheless, we've been in this long-term relationship. And so I just use that as an example of I've had certain privileges, I guess, to put it that way, where I think the aging process doesn't seem as scary as it might seem for folks where that's still a thing they're worried about.
You don't worry about loneliness.
Okay, you're putting it in more explicit terms. Yes, loneliness or isolation.
Correct.
Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that's something I might not have a fear of at some other point in my life, but I just... So, in terms of...
That's helped in this
It's helped process. In this sense, and... I don't know. For me, I have to tell you, I was very excited about my 30th birthday.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, oh, this is exciting, because your 20s... Okay, I get it. It's like the young, cool decade or whatever. But you also have a lot of trials and tribulations in your 20s. I couldn't afford many things throughout my 20s because I was always working more like scrappier jobs. And I know that, again, income's not something that inevitably comes with age, clearly. But I just mean like these different things where you were struggling in different ways. And by the time you get to your 30s, you're like, I kind of know a little bit more about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that was exciting to me. So no, I think I've kind of embraced... I think I've always embraced aging.
That's great.
I say that. I'm sure I'm being contradictory because we all are, and there's probably things that, you know...
Well, again, perfect. I'm not about perfection.
Okay.
I think about words like integrity and consistency. You know, for me, I'm sure I contradict myself a million times a day because I'm a human being. But I would expect, you know, and hope that when people see, like right now, people are a little upset with me.
Oh.
Do you want to know why?
Yeah.
It's going to be over by the time this airs. But here at this conference, I am having a debate.
Oh, I know about the debate.
With DeAndre Moore, who I love, who, you know...
Friends or frenemies.
Friends or frenemies. And it's an artificial dichotomy, prep versus U equals U.
Correct.
It is, but we're playing with it. We're having fun. We're having a little fun on the 9 a.m. on the very last day.
Some queer
of the conference. We're being silly. But a lot of people... in our advertising didn't understand the humor.
Is it because they think you're undermining irony? Yeah, okay.
They thought that we're actually going to have a debate, and like some people are really upset with me at this moment. So, and they're not even here. Not the people here at the conference, but the people who saw this on social media. So I'm like, all right. If anyone knows who I am and what I'm about, they would know that I am not against U equals U, nor do I see U equals U. I mean, this is what the last 10 years of my work has been about. But on the other hand, I can't control what people think, and I'm just like, all right, folks. My integrity is solid here.
My integrity is solid.
I am goofy.
That's a value of yours.
I am joking. I'm trying to get someone to show up at 9 a.m. on the 4th day of the conference.
And I think that's the way to do it.
You know, and we're working, me and DeAndre are trying to say, like, okay, let's play. Let's have some fun. That is so much in alignment with who I am, even though people may not see that. So that's what I'm learning about.
I love that.
It's like, all right, I cannot control what other people, how they perceive my work or my values. All I can do is just say, this is who I am. This is how I show up.
Right.
Sometimes it's just fucking goofy. And, you know. And that doesn't mean everyone's always going to get the humor.
Right, because it's like the aging process often affords that confidence. Yeah. And if it comes with integrity and accountability, it feels like a good trifecta to me. Yeah. Right? Because that rootedness in who you are is a beautiful thing. Yeah. If that rootedness is... And I'm just going to use an example, and this is not me trying to sound ageist because there's plenty of older adults who have done a great job embracing like trans and non-binary folks, right? But if that rudeness comes in, oh, well, I don't know what they pronouns are, so I'm not going to learn that. That's not like that's not rudeness in who you are. That is like a lack of accountability versus I don't deal with bullshit and I know how to like be who I am. That's that rootedness you're kind of after. So it has to come with like this, I'm still able to evolve as a person. Yeah. I am sure by the time I'm in my 60s, there's going to be something that I just really am not familiar with because it's so disconnected from the way I've grown up. And I need to be able to support that and embrace that. And so it needs to be an evolving thing, while I think this, like, the thing that's stable is that rootedness and confidence and integrity in who you are.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know.
Exactly.
Now I feel like I'm writing a weird philosophy book talking about this out loud.
Well, I'm glad we're thinking about this. Yeah. And so I mean, this is what I think makes aging a lot of fun. One of the many things is learning. And I think as long as we're open and we're willing to learn new things and at least listen to people's experiences, then it's good. We may agree or disagree.
And that's also fine, still to agree and disagree, of course.
But yes, I have witnessed that I think the pushback against evolving pronouns has largely been for people who are, you know, and I'm not talking necessarily even queer, and the straight community. Oh, yeah. Is often older people who have grown up with gender as a dichotomy.
Yes.
And even women who have been on the oppressed side of that dichotomy, who have been specifically targeted for violence and discrimination because they are cisgender women who do not feel comfortable exploring or challenging new dimensions to pronouns. And again, so I'm not telling anyone what to think. I've just noticed that does appear to be a bit of a generation gap culturally, is seeing how people who are older who grew up with these dichotomies are really cling to them. And I hope, and I'm saying in the bathtub, that I hope, I think as long as we're able and willing to learn new things.
Right, because again, we're using this specific example, and I think all the things you brought up are very valid about where sometimes people's defensiveness or trauma or interpretations of change come from. And I think what we've seen over time is that there's this pattern, though, where it doesn't really matter what it does matter what the oppression or what the thing is. But I guess what I mean is that these generational conversations will always be a thing, even as each generation evolves and changes. So it's not like it's just baby boomers causing some kind of issue or just Gen Z bringing something up. Like Gen Z will age, the next generation will, we always need to have this like space for intergenerational dialogue that feels very supportive and accountable and thorough and like inclusive and
And it's not new. I mean, this is not a new argument.
It's
not new. The song, there's a really popular song where it's like, oh my God, these young people today with their crazy dancing and all this crazy music, what's going to happen? Our society's going to fall apart. And oh my God, women are wearing pants. Our society's going to hell. You know what song that is? Anything Goes from the 1930s. Cole Porter wrote about this. It was that generation gap even back then. This catastrophizing, like, these young people, look what's going to happen if they're in control.
Oh my gosh, when I was in my journalism program in undergrad, that was randomly what my degree was. I don't really feel like I've done a lot of journalism, but anyways, I know how to write. But someone they had pulled headlines from articles and said, what generation is this about? And all of the headlines really blended together, like young people are doing this. And basically, what was revealed at the end of this project was like, some of these are about teenagers and young folks, youth in the 60s, and some of them are about millennials, and you can't even tell the difference.
Right.
Because the discourse and the spin kind of gets replicated over time.
So, so what's also standing out to me at this conference is how many of us folks in our 50s and 60s have known each other for decades. We come to these conferences.
Sure.
And we're also talking a lot about the fact that 33-year-olds and there's really a gap here in terms of age. There's not as many younger people entering into the field of HIV.
Yes.
And when they do enter, they don't necessarily stay for their entire career the way us others did.
Sure.
And I'm just curious for you, so what brought you into the HIV field and what's kept you in the HIV field?
Oh my God. I love this question. It's a big question. So what I gotta say, I have told this story before. The first time that I really became connected with HIV was actually in grad school. So my master's degree is in gender studies. I went to Central European University in Budapest, Hungary. And a lot of queer theory is rooted in things like ACT UP and AIDS, HIV history, because so much of it, these critiques around heteronormativity, they sort of go hand in hand with a lot of queer theory concepts. My point is, when I started reading this all up, and I'm really reading extensively about HIV AIDS history, I sat there thinking, it's 2013 at the time. I'm in my early 20s. I'm a gay man who's been out since I was 16. How come I don't know any of this? Like, I was kind of upset at both myself and the sort of systems, I guess. And so it really made me realize, this is important history. Talk about intergenerational dialogues that we need. And of course, as I continued that journey, there's many reasons for that. And, we lost a lot of lives of folks. We lost a generation. And then I think people are dealing with trauma and all kinds of things where maybe they're, like you mentioned, people who maybe are of a certain age are conversing a lot with people in their own circles. So there was this clear generational gap. So that was my first peak interest in HIV is a part of my community. It's a part of my history. Why do I not know this? Then later in life, it was I should be on PrEP. Okay, I learned about PrEP when I went to a gay men's health symposium in 2014 and realized, whoa, this applies to me. I think I should have been on this already by now, and this is important. And so that's how I got like the concept of the history and even the concept of this very effective prevention tool. Then I briefly worked 1 month in a temp job at what was called then the Colorado AIDS Project, now the Colorado Health Network. Loved the work, but left because it was a temporary job and was working in a different position. And when the 2016 election happened, it was kind of like all these things I just told you came together for me, where it was like, I'm worried about the state of access to health services in the US, knowing that this person's going to be president, knowing what this discourse is right now. It feels dangerous, it feels scary. Wait a minute, I used to briefly work at this place, and wait a minute, I remember how much this HIV history is important to me, and also I'm on this preventative drug. Like, it just all came together like, you should work in this field. And I also simultaneously, right before that, was approached from a focus group that I was in Colorado for people who were on PrEP, to be in this like state campaign that they did, and I did it, and it wasn't perfect, but the campaign tried to feature folks on PrEP and make that a norm. And so, yeah, it just all kind of culminated. And then when I got the job, it was like, oh yeah, this is where I belong. This was my first sort of full-time job in the field. It was working at the Colorado Health Network, doing what we call like health access work. So basically enrolling people living with HIV in health insurance plans, navigating the marketplace, navigating the state ADAP program, SDAP program. And anyways, that's where I came to this field, was like at points in my life learning the history and how it connects to me as a queer person, literally accessing the system, which was a challenge for me. And this is a privileged cisgender white man, and I still was having these issues, so you can understand how that is for other folks. And then having this opportunity open up, and now this sexual health, this is the field for me, because it relates to my values. It relates to what I believe is important. I feel like
what are your values? What's important?
Integrity, one that we've already talked about. Sort of anti-oppression, or sort of anti-oppression is probably the easiest way, and community. And so those values come together in sexual health, because we're working on behalf and in partnership, hopefully, in paid partnership, hopefully, with community members, paid people, don't just tokenize them. And we're making an impact. Sexual health is also challenging a lot of heteronormative assumptions. That's also important to me, because I just kind of talked about queer theory, this like background of who I am. And yeah, so it really makes a lot of sense to me. You know, I think about how ACT UP and AIDS activism led to significant changes in the healthcare system, period, right? In terms of access to drugs and in terms of access to healthcare. That's sort of what I'm kind of trying to get at. That's like something that I know I play a small role, but I want to be a part of that. Is like, we can transform some systems through sexual health. And make people's lives more pleasurable and better and more equitable and all those. Sorry, there was a TED Talk in the Temp Talk.
That's exactly what we're doing. I am going to shift a little bit, though.
Yeah. Can I shift too?
Yeah. We're going to move around because, you know.
Whoa! That felt good. No, that felt good.
Okay.
You got room?
Yeah.
We're in a tiny tub.
We're in a little tub, but it's, you know, it's a...
How am I going to, like, trying to, like...
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Just making sure I don't accidentally flash anybody. Okay.
You're good.
Hi. You good?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good. Yeah.
So that conduit of sexual health and social justice,
yes,
is absolutely, in my opinion, the historical bridge that has been there, but often, I don't know, at these conferences I feel like I wish we had more of these talks about the fact that when we're talking, I mean, because we talk a lot about PrEP and U equals U and even PEP at these things. Well, not enough about PEP.
Not enough about PEP at all. No one's talking about PEP.
So my guest Mario, on the show, who's presenting at the conference, is doing his talk that PEP is the Rodney Dangerfield of HIV prevention. And Rodney Dangerfield was a comedian.
I know who Rodney Dangerfield is, but I feel like I still don't get the reference.
His whole shtick was like, I get no respect.
No respect. Wow, talking about me making a generational. Yeah, okay.
That's okay. No respect. So Mario explains that. Yeah. But we talk about these things as biomedical interventions, and sometimes we talk about some of the barriers and the obstacles to that. But what I think we are missing is talking about how sexual health is a conduit of having a more compassionate, humane society.
Oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful way of putting it. You put it much better than me. Yes, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. Yes. Yes.
I mean, believe me, I mean, for the most part, people who are having good sex don't walk down the street killing other people. They don't go into schools killing other people. That's a fact. I dare anyone to challenge me on this. But for the most part, when people have a sense of sexual agency...
Get a statistic confirmed.
Right. I want to hear about it. If anyone thinks that's not true. If somebody has a sense of sexual agency in their life, and agency means the power to not have sex.
Correct.
But then that also means that they have the choice and the agency to say yes to sex.
They have autonomy over their body.
Yes.
They have autonomy over their physical interactions, their emotional interactions with folks. They can set boundaries. All of that. Yes. Those are really critical things that in an oppressive system that has numerous inequities, people aren't getting those things, right? They're not getting bodily autonomy. They're not getting,
Right. And once again, I think it's falling on women or people with vaginas now with the Roe back and Roe versus Wade. That's just like, again, that's there's so much overlapping with HIV and PrEP and U equals U and reproductive rights that I feel like we're also not really. For a conference that's supposedly about intersectionality, that doesn't seem to be happening. Unless I missed it, and it's possible because I've been doing these bathtub interviews and practicing self-care, so maybe I missed them. I don't get it. But this is the kind of mindset that I think is really, really valuable in terms of leaders. And
there's some of it happening, I think, but I think you're right. We need to really be doing so much more in terms of that sort of approach where I've talked about this with some folks here that sometimes, and I don't think this is just our conference, to be clear. I think this is the nature of a lot of conferences where people want to get together and say, look at all the great stuff we're doing, and that's fine. Or we want to repeat these narratives to each other we all kind of know already. We kind of know that narrative, we know that problem. We kind of need more of the real, concrete, i.e., we're not working, reproductive health and HIV are not working enough together. What does that really mean? Let's talk about it. Let's get into the weeds of it all. Again, I'm sure some of that's happening at the conference. I've seen the agenda and it is diverse, so I don't want to make it sound like folks here are not doing that, but I think you're right. We kind of don't do it enough. And not just in conference spaces, but in our agencies, in the coalitions we're in.
And that, again, sexuality in terms of a mental health perspective is a healthier way to, sexual agency is a healthier way to exist in this world.
Yes.
I do believe it has greater health and public policy, less violence, less violent crime, and that's just still...
okay. Yeah. No, I'm thinking about it.
So it's very hard to talk about pleasure and health. For me, it's been hard at a conference like this that is sort of focused on what's wrong.
Okay.
Here's what's wrong, here's what's wrong, here's what's wrong. Not that we don't need to talk about that, but it's like when that's really skewed towards this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong, and you're talking to people that also know it already, so it's not like they're learning anything new.
Yeah, we know what's wrong.
Just sort of saying the same thing over and over again in the same rooms.
Yes, exactly. You don't want to be just an echo chamber to ourselves. Yeah. And again, I don't think that's just us. I think that this is something people learn how to do in these kinds of spaces. So I think we can give ourselves some credit in knowing we're not purposely the ones trying to do this on our own, but yeah, it's a part of that process.
Now, if someone came to you and said, okay, I want to focus on Colorado and want to use your expertise to build a conference, to build a summit, Chris, tell us what to do. What would that look like?
What would a summit look like?
What would a conference or summit planned by Chris Zivalich? I'm sorry.
Zivalich. That's okay.
What would that look like?
It's a fun last name. Yeah. So wow. That is a really good question. I mean, hopefully it would be a good event regardless. I think it would be, okay, first of all, I think there'll be certain goals that need to happen. We need to be giving people tools that they can really walk away with. And I know that's something that everyone wants to say, but, what does that really mean? It would need to be planned with people who are impacted the most and by this work. So in other words, for example, I'm in a coalition right now, our fast track cities, where we're working with folks living with HIV to plan this anti-stigma campaign and help us figure out a website that has good resources for folks who are newly diagnosed with HIV. That's the kind of community coalition that needs to plan something like this. It needs to be people who are they should get paid for the time they're doing and planning it, but nevertheless, they're from the community. They don't necessarily need to have some kind of job title or whatever, but they are impacted by the work, so they're helping plan what this process looks like. And you give them also some support and structure so that they're not trying to build it from scratch. Okay. So that's what I guess what I'm first giving you is like my values sort of foundation of like who's involved in the planning, who's really represented, and what are some of our goals. Now, in terms of, if you're asking about like what is going on in Colorado specifically,
what would make sense for Colorado? What part of Colorado?
So I'm from Denver, but the organization I work at is statewide. So just to be clear, I feel like I have some involvement across the state, or at least some knowledge of some of the, because we have rural parts of the state, right? We have other cities like Colorado Springs that are
very conservative.
That are more mega churches, I think, per square mile in Colorado Springs. I mean, don't fact check me, that might be wrong now. But, we have these differences, political and geographic, literal differences. So I think going back to that, like, how's the community folks involved? I think doing some kind of way to assess different needs would be like one of the things we would do. But, okay, so when it comes to overdose prevention, syringe access, the drug epidemic is an epidemic across the country. Colorado is certainly a part of that. We have seen both successes and challenges in preventing overdose deaths. Like that needs to be a major part of it. The Latinx community is just clearly disproportionately getting access to PrEP in Colorado. Is getting disproportionately less access.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So there need to be certain communities that need to, that I would want to, I want to talk to them and say like, this is the statistic, but what do you really think we need to do to, how can we really make sure that the community feels supported and is leading those efforts? I think I would basically help. And this is a little chaotic of an answer, but I would try to find the themes, right, of what seems to be important, I think. But I would really try to also step back at the same time. Like, I need to be there to support the process instead of saying, like, hands off, because I think that's leveraging white power as a white person to say, like, hey, I'm going to, and as a cisgender person with cisgender power, like, I'm going to, make sure I get all the resources and that I'm doing a lot of work for this conference that's happening in our theoretical world. And I'm also like stepping back and like letting other people say what needs to be said and plan what needs to be planned. There was a HIV is not a crime dinner that I went to while I was here. And I think there was a lot of really good conversation about that of amazing folks in the Black community who are doing this HIV decriminalization.
I was going to go to that.
Yes, it was amazing. Amazing. No, it's okay.
I missed it.
Let's give it a shout out because it was so.
I was doing a touch with somebody else.
Oh well, that's okay. Well, there you go. But yeah, and a lot of the folks on that amazing panel talked about like, are you really centering people? And by the way, what centering really means is you are literally stepping away from it. You're not taking the credit for it. And so, I want to figure out what that would look like for me in this if I were doing this hypothetical Colorado conference where folks that are routinely left out are not just put on a poster or say like, look, we have somebody, okay, but that they're actually planning the full process. Because that group I mentioned to you at the very beginning of this long-winded answer, the community group living with HIV, they are essentially helping us plan our World AIDS Day event. We're going to premiere on December 1st, which will be after this airs. So stay tuned for information on that from Denver 5280 Fast Track Cities. And this World AIDS Day event, they will be showcasing the work that they've done. And again, so literally every time someone else that's not from the community group has come to us with an idea for this event, right? Like, what about this speaker? What about this food? What about this? We have always said we are going back to the community group. We're not making decisions for them. It's going to be decisions in partnership with them, and they need to be given all the real context, all the information, so they feel empowered to make decisions as a group. So I think that this is again, I don't know if this is where you were going with that question, but this is where that's my thought process.
Love it. I'm gonna get that. I look forward to hearing how that goes.
Yay! December 1st.
How that goes. So I guess the other thing I'm thinking of from what you said earlier is that I'm curious to ask more, if it's all right, to ask about a relationship with a bit of an age gap.
Sure.
People watching this are either in relationships with differences in age or want to be.
Yeah.
And so you were 25 when you began seeing someone who at the time was 37.
Correct.
Which, So now you're 32. Does 44 feel like a big age gap the way it did when you were 25 and 37?
No, I don't think it feels like less of a gap than it did when we first started dating. And I think that probably is something a lot of people would understand or resonate with, right? Like even when, I mean, I can tell this because Martin, my partner, well, you know, he's told the story to other folks, so it's not like it's a secret, but like when he was going to be going on his first date with me, even he and his friends were kind of like, okay, you know, this isn't really serious, is it? You know, you're going on a date with a 25-year-old? And he was like, yeah, probably not. It's probably just for fun. And then we really hit it off. And so I like to use our story when I'm talking to friends who are unsure about a first date with somebody because of their age. And I say, look, age does matter. It does correspond to someone's experiences. And you just never know. Like, just don't let it define the narrative right away. I will say, like, where we're at, and what's been really common throughout our relationship is we have really good communication. And I think that kind of stuff is what's the solid foundation, no matter what your age difference is. Our age differences still come into play. Even the Rodney Dangerfield joke kind of made me giggle at myself. But like, you know, Martin will sometimes make a reference and I'm like, actually I don't, or like, you know, some movie that was really popular in the late 80s that I'm like, I never heard of that movie, you know? Or same thing, I'm like, how come you haven't seen Disney Channel original movies? You know, so we have, and that's a silly example, but like that does come up. But I think that I think the queer community is actually poised to do well with age gaps because we don't need to fit the same heteronormative script. And it's like, yeah, we can be different. You know, we have like daddy embracing. We have these like concepts kind of embedded in our culture, I think, that still come marred with ageism and other problems, but like also allow people to embrace these like age differences. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I have never felt there's a connection between chronology and emotional maturity.
Okay, well that is absolutely true. 100%.
Oh, I have known
100%.
I've known men in their 50s who have the temperament of a 14-year-old, and I've known 25-year-olds who have incredible, abundant patience and wisdom.
Well, and I also support a youth program where I see 15-year-olds who are doing amazing work.
Yeah.
And really taking, you know, so it just shows that like there's this generational perspective that's important, and people mature emotionally at different rates.
And I also think what we have to offer in the queer community is the fact we don't have a dating pool as much as our straight counterparts, just statistically. So it doesn't make sense to rule anybody out.
Although I think people are getting gayer, but go on.
I think there's more of us. There's certainly more people out now than there was 30 years ago.
Oh, but for sure that. The political
and out and dateable. But I just think, you know, it's like, if you're going to limit your options to a very specific decade or a specific thing, and if your intention is to actually be in some sort of relationship or connection, you're really cutting your own nose to spite your face by putting a limit on age.
Oh my gosh, you really are. And again, it's just like Martin and I, you know, maybe we both had different expectations. We both weren't sure what that age gap would mean, and yet we were able to fall in love and be in a good partnership. And the age gap shows up in different ways, but it also is not this defining factor, and it's not a point of tension.
What's it like for you now to be getting closer to the age that he was when he met you?
Oh, yeah. That's funny. I hadn't thought of it like that. Like in like what, like 4 years I'll be the age
You'll be the age he was when he met you. Isn't that weird? Like, I'm sort of
that's a little trippy.
Yeah.
You know, one of my best friends, he kind of mentions this stuff all the time because he just kind of always thinks that way, where he's like, you know, when my parents were the age I am right now, they already had me, and I was already like 4 years old or whatever. You know, I'm like, yeah, that's so interesting to think about how that's just natural life processes where you're like, oh, now I'm that age too. Okay.
I know. I've thought about when I've gotten to be the age that I was when I dated older guys who I dated, and now that I'm the age they were.
I don't know how old you are.
I'm 51.
51, okay.
And I'm like, oh my God, how do they even put up with me? I don't even know. But they did. And I'm glad they did.
Well, and I mean, there's things about my 25-year-old self and Martin and I first started dating that are very different than my near 33-year-old self, let's be honest. So.
Yeah.
In good and bad ways, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Anything I haven't asked you that you would like to share or express or talk about for the people watching us in the tub?
Oh my gosh. I feel like, no, this has been great. I love this kind of back and forth. I hope I made sense.
We'll say good sense.
Good sense.
We need you in this field. Very good sense.
I appreciate that. And this was great. I loved it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, good. So I want to thank you because these conversations, I mean, this is why I'm doing this series, is to talk to some of the leaders and people working in the field in all different places and stages and perspectives and ages and contexts.
Yes.
And just to hear what their thoughts are and insights are about where we're at and where we're going and where we could be going if we like got our shit together.
I love that. That's a perfect way to kind of like summarize it. And I think that's where this conference, like, I feel like we brought up some critiques maybe, and again, I think the critiques are not specific to this conference. It's like specific to like the way the world works, and ultimately what I love about this conference is that's what everyone here is really doing.
Yeah.
So
everybody here. I mean, this is why I started.
It's a passionate field
because the people here
are
some
brilliant,
of the most amazing,
and amazing
in the world.
We again,
in my opinion,
we have it's like the integrity. I totally agree. Like are there contradictions? Sure, because that's like what we were talking about earlier. But it's that shared integrity across the board of like, no, we're in it, and our bubble is smaller than we think. Like we're in sexual health, and then it
is.
So we gotta
and I think we need to get more people in this field. This is the thing that
this is the generational thing.
Folks are talking about. It's like we want more people to want to work in sexual health and HIV field and want to stay in the field and I think there's a little problem with that as well.
But we have work to do, but I think it's possible.
Yeah.
So
starting with, as you said many times, paying people for the work they're doing, because that's not the mindset a lot of these agencies work with.
Cannot be like some kind of gift card that just the burger place down the street, or not a living wage,
I mean, again, a lot of us were volunteering or giving free labor when our friends were dying on the street. And that was like
in
part
response
of
to a crisis. Yes.
Right? But that's not a sustainable business model.
Absolutely not.
40 years.
No.
Hell no. All right. Okay. So folks, if people want to follow you, your Instagram link is right down below, but is there any other way you would want people to follow you or see your thoughts and work other than Instagram?
I feel like this is now like antiquated. People are absolutely able to add me on Facebook if they want to. I know. I still use it.
I use it.
Chris Zivalich, and then if you're interested in like the more sort of HIV sexual health field side of it, I guess feel free to add me on LinkedIn too. Just look up my name and or whatever. And I think that's all I got.
Great.
Right? Yeah. My TikTok's not really a thing these days, so we'll leave that one out. For now.
So folks, thank you for watching. I encourage you, if you like this, subscribe down below. I'm trying to get more subscribers so I can be live streaming. Take a look at the duckies. And again, just think about like what some of these subjects have meant for you. What does it look like to have intergenerational relationships in your private life, in your relationships, in your work life, in your work field? What is your passion? Where is your integrity? And, just keep thinking about these things.
I love it.
We're going to keep going.
I love it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.